One focuses on volume, which is Holloway, on distance control and strike volume. Charles, he invests in chaos. He invests in closing the distance, landing knees, landing teeps, very powerful strikes. He's a guy who has more power than Holloway, but let's analyze their first fight. Charles was still in the UFC 330 in 2018. He was still a kid in mixed martial arts, still a kid in development, facing a guy at the peak of his career. And at that moment, Holloway knew how to control the distance, knew how to manage it, landing a volume of strikes until Charles got hurt his neck. After that fight, Charles evolved a lot. That loss was very important for Charles in his career. Charles moved up a weight class. He struggled a lot to make featherweight. Anyone who knows Charles knows he's not a guy who makes featherweight easily. He's a very tall kid. He's at least 6 feet tall, and he's very strong for that weight class. Lightweight is Charles' division. There, his game became stronger. This rematch between the two, Charles has to be very sure about the timing, so he has to feint a lot, play a lot. Tip with the right leg. You can see that Charles threatens a lot with his left leg, but the leg he's dangerous with for the tip is his right leg and his left leg. He has to use it very carefully because he feints with his leg a lot but throws few strikes. He throws it so the opponent knows that it's not a move that becomes dangerous. So he just lifts his front leg to close the distance and go for a hand strike. Charles' strategy really has to be about closing the distance and imposing his strength game. But he has to be very careful with that because Holloway is one of the most technical boxers in the UFC. So he's a guy who can strike while moving backward very easily, a distance controller and a very strong counter striker, has good spinning attacks and switches stances with a lot of ease. Charles moves forward, has the strength advantage, and should impose his grappling to take away the striker's power. As for Holloway, he's a guy who will focus on distance control and throwing a high volume of strikes, which will frustrate Charles's game. Let's analyze Charles's fight with Gaethje. He takes some shots, and Gaethje is a guy. He gets found. Every time Charles went in, he found Gaethje, and he took some shots. He even went to the ground, accepted it, and called Gaethje in. Gaethje didn't accept going to the ground and told Charles to get back up. Charles is a guy who doesn't control the distance. He keeps closing the distance on his opponent, bringing grappling into the fight. That's the game he should play. With Holloway, yes, the same strategy, but he has to be a bit more careful. Doing this with Holloway, Holloway will move back. He won't get to Holloway as easily as he did with Gaethje, so he has to threaten more. Use the rear leg deep more and do less of that excessive feinting with the lead leg. He keeps moving forward in a very Muay Thai style, using that lead leg deep, that feint with the lead leg. That won't work with Holloway, guys. Holloway will control the distance and he puts a lot of weight on his lead leg. That could be very dangerous for Charles. He needs to study, invest in feints, make Holloway feel apprehensive too. He should move forward like he did with Gaethje, he should, but he needs to be much more cautious when closing the distance. This fight between Holloway and Gaethje will show you a lot about how Gaethje's game is. He is Gaethje. He's a guy who takes hits and gives them back. He doesn't control the distance. He's someone who rarely moves backward to control the distance. He's a guy who goes for infighting the whole fight. He's a guy who moves forward. Gate rarely moves forward. He's a guy who attacks very little. He's more of a counter-puncher. And Holloway, in this fight, made him really frustrated, making him stay in the air the whole time, not finding the fight. And this can happen with Charles because Holloway does this very efficiently. For me, he's one of the guys with the most technical boxing in mixed martial arts. A lot of people will mention Topuria. Topuria is a guy who controls well and all that, but he's a guy who has a lot of power in his hands. So he doesn't build on volume, he builds on precise strikes. Holloway doesn't have one-punch power. Holloway builds his knockouts. Charles needs to understand not to go at that pace. A very aggressive Muay Thai style. Without using the teep, you have to use the isolated teep, throw the right teep, and if you're going to use the left, don't use it on the attack, use it on the entry, stay a bit longer, and use it more for defense, like we do in Muay Thai. If Charles manages to take the fight to the ground because he's a guy who is hardly ever taken down, he has very good distance control. Charles has very little chance of getting a perfect takedown timing. He'll have to put Holloway against the cage and work on grappling there, in the middle. It's going to be very hard for him to find that perfect timing. But he can't just go for those isolated clinch attempts. The striking will have to come into play, like we said, with isolated strikes. Charles has the advantage. He's better at knowing the right time to strike as long as he doesn't fall into Holloway's game, because Holloway is very controlling. He moves out and strikes. You know, he's a guy who creates a lot of openings, a lot. He builds up. He keeps making Jeb move backwards. He's a guy who won't want to fight. He won't want to grapple with Charles at all. So Charles needs to study the right moment to go for the clinch, and that's where he'll use his strength. The striker and the grappler. The grappler should never start trading blows with the striker right away. Grab him, wear him out, make him hold an isometric position. If they trade standing up, it's Holloway's advantage since he controls distance well. He knows how to hit without getting hit, and Charles is that kind of fighter too. Let's see who hits harder. If Holloway calls him out like he did with Gaethje, like, come on, let's see who hits harder. Charles doesn't stand a chance, guys. That's Holloway's game. He's got one of the best boxing skills in the UFC. So Charles needs to mix things up in mixed martial arts. You know, like I told you guys, he's got heavier hands, he's got more power in his strikes, but when it comes to volume, that's Holloway's thing, and that's where he could have a problem. I'd say this fight is 50-50. With a slight advantage for Charles in terms of strength, guys. Charles's strength game against Holloway, he used to make weight much more easily, halfway than Charles. So Charles is a slightly stronger guy, a guy who, if he manages to get the fight to the ground, bring the clinch into this fight, in the first round, taking away the freedom of explosive muscles, which is necessary for a striker to succeed, so he should look to tie up the fight very cautiously at first. And after he gets him against the cage, makes Holloway use his strength, tires out Holloway's arms, then yes, Charles's game starts to get interesting. Charles shouldn't fall into that crazy best motherfucker thing, which is all about trading strikes. Look at what Gaethje did against Holloway, what Holloway and Poirier did too, but Charles shouldn't accept that, because that's Holloway's game. If it goes to the judge's decision, he'll definitely have the advantage. Now, if Charles can come in smart, imposing his grappling, using his power strikes, and not just trading boxing with Holloway, not just rushing in, but going for the clinch and using his strength, taking advantage of the physical edge that Charles has, guys, I can see Charles succeeding with that. When he fought Holloway back then, he was just a rising kid against a high-level athlete already, and that athlete is still at a high level. But Charles today, how many years later? 2018. 8 years of a lot of training, a lot of fights happened. Get ready, because a different Charles is coming. If Charles manages to impose his game, Holloway won't have the time or distance to set up the knockout. Holloway needs volume. He needs several moves to build up his knockout. But Charles doesn't. Charles just needs to land a good shot, take it to the ground, and show what he does best, which is jiu-jitsu. So, Charles should impose this game transition in mixed martial arts, not box with him, right? He should impose it, yes, a strong Muay Thai style. Moving forward, throwing deep kicks and knees with your right leg, using those bicycle kicks you really like, my brother. But don't stand in front of Holloway's punches. Go forward aggressively, with attitude, get into the clinch, take away Holloway's strength, so he can't put on that high volume he's used to. All right, my friend, we're in this together, Charlinho.